Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm a witch, and I'm a medium, a psychic, and a tarot reader, and a homeopath, and I have been studying mystical pursuits for most of my life, and I saw spirit from a very young age, from back to the earliest memories that I have. I remember at night sensing beings around the room and not knowing what it was. And it was many years until I worked out what was happening to me with premonition dreams, etc. Because in my day, when I was young, there was no internet, there was no TV at that point in my home. And there was one or two books in the library that talked about things like astrology and mythology. But other than that, I had no real understanding, no support to work out why I was having these experiences. So it's been a long journey getting to a place where I can now not only understand what's happening, but really appreciate what's happening in my world, and how my world is not the world that I was taught it was. It's so much bigger, it's so much more interesting than just the kind of 3D reality that we're taught. So I want to talk to you tonight about what's happening in the world and how I approach it, because I think that's probably what's on people's minds more than anything else. And it doesn't take much to realise that there's significant changes going on, and we don't know necessarily why. We can look at the astrology, and that certainly indicates some of the reasons, and we can look at karmically, or we can look at patterns of human history. We can look at all sorts of different reasons to explain the chaos that we have. But we are definitely moving from a place of order to chaos, a place of understanding and structure to a place of being lost, confused, fearful, because the usual anchors that we have are no longer in place. So how do we address that? And I know that many people, many teachers that work in this space are addressing that. But my particular way is to use ritual and to work with my altar. I have a working altar at all times, and I clean it out on a Wednesday, which is a Mercury day. So it's a good day to kind of communicate and to kind of refresh the way that I communicate with the powers that be, whether it's we think of those powers as the goddess or spirit or the unbounded one, or many of the wonderful names that we have for the unseen world. So I communicate through my altar, and I will set intentional prayers, otherwise known as spells, on that altar that focus on what it is that I'm seeing in the world and what it is that I'm seeing in my own life. So if I see dissonance and confusion, I will try and bring serenity and peace. And I may specifically work on certain areas in the world that seem to be struggling the most. And I do that through symbol, through the use of crystals, or the use of plants, the use of words, any way that I have of symbolizing what it is that I want to ask the unseen world, to ask the goddess to bring their support, to bring enlightenment, to bring nourishment to. And I will select from a number of many things. I'm very much about use what you have. You don't have to go onto Etsy and buy specific objects. There's so much in your garden or your nearby park. There's so many plants. There's stones, there's feathers, there's all sorts that we have in the natural world that we can work with. But we can also work with things that we actually, have that are man-made too, like little symbols. I have a beautiful little bronze rocking chair with a symbol of a dragon on it, which I use a lot I place it on the altar, and then I'll put a symbol of somebody that I'm working with in that golden chair as a way of kind of focusing intent, and also using the symbolism of the dragon as this integrated masculine, feminine, and feminine, divine feminine. It represents all the different elements in one, and it's a very powerful symbol. So you know, I will use different things to kind of focus that intention and to ask for what it is that we need. And sometimes I'm aware of the fact that when I'm asking, what I'm really asking for is my deeper consciousness, my awareness, the all of me that is not inside this body as just, you know, a bag of bones, because we're so much more than that. So these wonderful archetypal energies and these beings, and whoever they are, whatever they are, it doesn't really matter. And people get into very kind of tight confusion about that. It's like, no, it's my God, no, it's your God, and that kind of thing. But there are no rules. We have to be very creative. That is the role of a witch, to be creative. We move like the willow. We move with the energies, and we work with the moon. So I will find the right phase of the moon to have the spell that I want. If I want abundance, it's going to be a moon that is growing or full. And if I want something to recede, then it's a moon that is receding. I'll choose the right day of the week that is represented or associated with a different god. I'll use different deities. Kuan Yin is one of my favourite to work with. You know, she brings healing and she transforms the tears of humanity. And she's a beautiful deity. There are many, many, many. So it's just about being creative. It's about being free. It's about being liberated from the constraints of human worry, which is what we all need right now. So in this place that we find ourselves in as a human family, we're kind of stuck in chaos, stuck in fear, stuck in transformation that we don't necessarily agree with or like. And we can't always change that. And in fact, we can rarely change that. And so we have to sit in that, we have to hold that space, and we have to always hold hope. That is very important. We always hold hope. I'm reminded often that in my early years, the Berlin Wall was an impossibility to imagine that it ever would come down. It was an impossibility when I lived in South Africa to believe that apartheid would ever end. It was an impossibility for my parents to believe that they would ever speak to a German person, you know, having gone through the war as Jews. And this last Passover, we had 3 German people at our table, non-Jews, and that would have been an absolute, total impossibility in a generation ago, because it would not have been conceivable. And yet these were people that are part of the family now, and very welcome. So there must remain hope, because humans have a capacity to overcome. They have a capacity, we have a capacity for transformation. We have a capacity for compassion. And those features of the divine feminine need to arise, and are arising at the same time as the chaos around us. We are all cauldrons. We are our own cauldrons. And so within us, we are creating the magic that changes the world. So that's me in a cauldron. And I just wanted to let you know a little bit about who I am. Thanks for listening.